Hello, and welcome back to the Alive and Sometimes Well podcast, a trauma informed business ish podcast for folks who see life as art and on all things business, relationships, and mental health. I'm Alyssa, a licensed therapist, certified coach, and space holder for space holders, creatives, entrepreneurs, and magic makers.
And I'm Rachel Turner. I'm a business coach for misfits, artists, and creatives. And today we just want to say a big thank you to everybody who has been reviewing the podcast and all of the sweet notes that we've got. Just like we said last time, we celebrate every single review and every single note that we get, and it means the absolute world to us. So thank you so much.
Yeah, we seriously love it. Thank you very much. We send them back and forth to each other. We read every single one. It is so exciting.
Yeah.
We are not chill about this at all.
No.
So we're like looking at all the cities people are listening to. I'm looking at the countries. We're looking at downloads, and reading all the reviews and just absolutely loving it. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Please keep leaving us reviews. If you like this, send it to someone you think would like it too. We're so grateful that you're listening.
Yes, it's just it means so much to me. I love waking up and looking at the reviews that pop up, and when I get kind notes, and then people will be, I think we said this last week too, but people were taking notes from one of the podcasts.
Yeah, mind blowing.
Mind blowing. So
mind
cool.
blowing. Well, and I think too, one of the things I love about our podcast, and it's something I really love from other people's work that I tap into, is storytelling. Our podcast is not about here are 3 steps and here are 6 tools and here is concrete advice that you can XYZ to feel better. It really is the art of storytelling and sharing from both professional and personal experiences. That is one of the ways I love to learn. I feel like there's so much advice and concrete steps and action steps and plans out there that this just feels really good to have a space to say, here are things that I've experienced personally, professionally. Here's the story. Take what you need, take what resonates, leave the rest. I'm really into that.
Yeah, I was just on a client call and someone said just that they love how it's not the 3 steps to blah, 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 blah. I love how it's business-ish and really on that ish part. This feels like a podcast. I mean, obviously we're recording it, so obviously I would want to listen to it, and I do listen to it, but I'm just so bored of people telling me what to do. And I'm so exhausted of everyone feeling so strongly that they know what I should do.
Yeah.
And I'm so over that. Please don't tell me what to do. Please don't tell me how to do it. Can we just have a conversation? What if that is enough?
Yeah. What if that is enough? What if we have conversation? Because business is life and life is business, especially for the way that you and I do it. And a lot of other people are doing it. And so just having room for all of these conversations feels so freeing and liberating. And I hate when people tell me what to do. Even if I wanted to do it, when someone tells me, I'm yeah, no, I don't want to fucking do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. So
no,
I'm happy that we're here, and I'm excited for today's topic.
Me too.
Today, we're talking all things holding space for yourself, burnout, how to take care of yourself when you support other people. This can be especially important for people who are professional space holders, coaches, therapists, healers, medical professionals, and anyone who supports humans in all spaces, really.
Yeah. And Rachel and I mean, we decided to talk about this because we're both professional space holders for a living. And I've worked as a therapist. I currently work as a coach. I do tarot readings. Rachel works for a coach and has for almost a decade, right?
Yeah. Almost 10 years.
Yeah. So we've both cycled through times in our work of feeling really burnt out and not taking care of ourselves. And it's almost it's not just limited to work, right? The personal and professional all blends together. And so there's times where life circumstances are impacting me feeling burnt out. I'm burnt out in life, but I'm okay in my business. I'm burnt out in work. I'm not okay. I'm fine in my life. And we think that people don't talk about this enough. And so a lot of times professionals, especially if you are working and supporting other people, if you're holding space for other people, you are going to go through times where you don't feel like doing it, or you're feeling burnt out, or you're feeling exhausted, and you just don't want to work. And I think it's this weird dynamic of when you're in the business of supporting other people, if you admit out loud that you don't want to work, or you're burnt out, or you don't want to do one more client session, it feels like this thing you're not supposed to say because you support other humans. Versus if I was oh, I do Excel spreadsheets all day, that feels like more permission to be I'm burnt out, because it's not anyone's humanity in question. And so I think people don't talk about this as much. And Rachel and I really wanted to have a space to talk about this today, because there's nothing wrong with you if you cycle through feeling like this.
Oh, I'm so excited about this. There's just so many things that I want to say about it.
Amazing. So first we're gonna, like always, start with our highs and lows, our high highs and low lows. So do you want to kick us
Yes.
off, Rachel?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay, we'll go with low first.
Okay.
Okay, all right. I was on
Okay.
a
All
trip.
right.
I was on a trip this week that was like kind of vacation, but not really because I was working. Um, and it's just it was a lot. We were with my mother-in-law and and her husband and my wife and my son. And it was just I have such a hard time resting. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
rest is really, really hard for me.
Yep.
So there was that. And then there's also being in the presence of, I think I talked about this on the last episode, like really trying to figure out my relationship with my mother-in-law and coming up against the feeling of feeling small
Hmm.
around her. And I just like it has that sense of like feeling on, you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
and like you're not good enough.
Yep.
And so it was like while we were in a beautiful place, all I could think about was how I wasn't enjoying myself because I felt like I was on, I felt like I wasn't enough. I felt um just off, and then I was judging myself for not enjoying my experience, and so it was just like I was so happy to get home. I By the end of the week, I was just exhausted that I had, like, spent my whole week dreading, like, everything, and it just feels like I wasted a week, and I feel, like, so upset about that.
Mm. That's just, again, it's hard when you add other people and the dynamics into the mix and add that on top of vacation. Vacation can be hard for those of us who struggle to rest. Like, it's
Yes.
uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable if you struggle to rest. I've gone through periods of feeling extremely jealous of people that can just rest so hard, because that's something that's not easy for me to do.
Oh, I'm glad I'm not al I mean, I know I'm not alone, but, like, I see people in my industry and everyone's all about like freedom, but like for who?
Mhm.
And vacationing and like doing all of these things and especially post COVID and I'm just like I can't rest. Like
Yeah.
I don't do that. And then paired on top of like difficult family dynamics, it just felt like oh, it was not good. I'm so happy to be home.
Okay. I'm glad you're home. I'm so glad you're home then. That's
Yeah, me
okay.
too. Yeah, it's good. It's good. Um but on a high note, so Sarah and I decided that we are going to start the process of having a baby.
Oh my God. I'm smiling so hard.
It's like it's I feel so scared and I feel so
Hmm.
excited. It's right now we're looking at like donors and different cryo banks. Um and we're just gonna like it feels so strange to just like pick a donor, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
It's a weird process. So that's gonna be happening in our world for the next like year and a half as we're kind of giving ourselves a timeline of like figuring that out, picking a
Yep.
donor, getting started. So that's my
Wow.
high.
Wow. That's a big one. I love that.
Thank
Congratulations.
you.
This is super exciting. And I love too that you're sharing like you're scared and you're excited, right? Like both.
Yeah. Yeah. I like my experience with Cooper, I had like such severe postpartum depression
Hmm.
that like the idea of carrying another child, like physically carrying a child, like I
Yeah.
just don't think that I could do. So Sarah actually is going to be carrying this baby.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to not do it alone this time.
Yes.
Um so I it's hard for me to envision a world where I am a parent again and I'm not alone.
Hmm.
So, yeah, it feels like the whole spectrum of human emotions all at once.
Yeah. I mean, it's good things, but it's new. And when things are new, our nervous system gets nervous. So, of course, you're nervous and excited. It's all new stuff, even when it's quote unquote good.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. So what about you? What are your highs and lows?
My highs. So I actually spent like 4 days with some friends. This like past end of the week over the weekend, in Austin, Texas, where one of my really good friends live, and then other close friends came down. So a little bit of context and like background. I have the BRCA1 mutation. So my
Mhm.
risk of breast and ovarian cancer is significantly higher than the general population. And in 2017, I had a preventative double mastectomy. Um, with reconstruction surgery, and that was like I was 25 when I had the first surgery, so it was a really huge life change, and I was not prepared
Yeah.
for the physical and mental emotional fallout that came with that, with those surgeries and that experience. And like as I was going through that, this new community was kind of being built, called the Breasties, and it's like for women impacted by cancer, breast cancer, gynecological cancer, things like that. Kind of because I like tried to go to some support groups, but people were significantly older than me. It was terrifying. It was just like
Mm.
not the right fit. So this community
Yeah.
was built, and I've been heavily involved with it for the last few years. And I found so many amazing people. And so I got to spend time with some friends that I've made and from that community. And it was just like so nourishing. We spent like the weekend, like we would be somewhere and people would be like, oh, like what are y'all up to, what is this about? And we were like, well, we all have one thing in common. There were 6 of us. We have one thing in common, like guess what it is? And people would be like guessing like really sweet normal things, and we'd be like, no, we all cut off our breasts, and like cue the major discomfort. Like people were just like
Oh my God, I love
squirming.
it.
Yeah, so that was my high, was just getting time with people. It had been years since I had seen some of my friends, so that was so lovely.
That's so
um
special.
it was so special. And like, especially, so I've gone through periods of such extreme loneliness. Like, God, we should do a whole podcast episode on that. But
Yeah.
throughout the pandemic, like I'm very independent. I actually need a lot of time to myself. I'm extremely introverted, but also extroverted. And so I thought, Chris being in residency and us moving out of state, like I knew it would be hard, but with the pandemic and not being able to visit people or have people visit us, I have never spent so much time alone in my entire life.
Yeah.
And so I just didn't realize how starved for human connection, like physical in real life, I can put my hands on you connection.
Yeah.
And so it was deeply nourishing to have that. Uh, Loved it, had a great time. And my low would be I randomly threw up one night in the middle of the night.
Oh.
But like I don't drink. So it wasn't like, oh, I got drunk and threw up from that. It was like, okay, so the other low of this is I have another chronic illness. And so I have to be really careful with food, like so careful. So there was like one restaurant everyone was going to, and I couldn't eat that kind of food at all. Or like, I think, Rachel, when you're like looking
Yeah.
at a menu and you're like, I need to know every single ingredient that's in it. Otherwise, I'm going to basically die, not actually die, but be in so much pain that I wish I were
Yeah.
dead. Yeah. So I couldn't eat the food. So I like got a burger on the way. I was like eating in the car. I think something was wrong with it. And I woke up in the middle of the night and threw up. And that was made me
Oh
sad. I
no.
hate throwing up.
Oh my God, me too. I was just talking to someone about that the other day. I would do anything to prevent myself from throwing up.
Yeah. Like it is like you just feel like an animal. You just like want to lay on the floor and die. I'm such a baby about it. I hate it.
You and me both. I'm right there with you. I'm so sorry. That sounds terrible.
I know. I think I talked about it the rest of the weekend. Like I texted Chris was working nights that night. And so he was up. So I was texting him like, at first I was like, I feel like I'm going to throw up. And I was like, I'm throwing up. And I was like, what if I have food poisoning and it's like this for the next 2 days and I have to come home? And he was like, don't spiral, don't spiral, don't spiral. And I was like, okay, I will. And I ended up being fine, but it was a rough 2 hours in the middle of the night for me.
Oh, I'm so sorry that you had that experience.
I know. I know. Me too. But it's over now. So I survived.
You survived. Well, I'm glad that you had a mostly very good weekend.
Also, I just kept saying this, like, are men okay? Because I've had such limited interaction with men in real life, and I had more than I desired this past few days. And I was like,
Um,
people are unwell, men specifically. This is not to like man hate or whatever. So I hope no one gets upset, but also like feel your feelings, whatever. But like so many weird experiences where I was like, they're not okay. Like I simultaneously feel like bad for them and really annoyed. So that was the other low. But anyways, that's me.
yeah, I love your shares. Thank you.
Yeah, went all over the map again with that one.
That's why we're here to go all over the map.
That's time. Yeah, exactly. That's why we're here. Love it. Love this for us. Okay. Are you ready? Should we get into it?
Yeah, I'm ready. Okay. So we got a lot of really good questions on burnout and navigating being a space holder for other space holders. And it really had me thinking, what are a handful of times where I have been burnt out? Actually, fun fact about burnout. I
Mhm.
think people are going to get mad at me for sharing this because one time someone like really thought I was a shitty person and I totally understand why.
Okay.
But when I started dating Sarah, she was getting her master's. Um, this is story is irrelevant a little bit, but she was getting her master's in leadership, and one of her friends needed her master's thesis to be written for her because she didn't have the time, and so
Um, like, is that allowed? Can you just be like, hire someone to do it?
no, it's not allowed, but I
I
did
didn't
it
think
for
so.
her.
Okay, okay,
I,
okay.
are you nervous for me? Should I have not have shared that?
No, no, not at all. Like, live your life.
Okay. Well, I wrote it for her and it was on burnout.
Yeah.
Um, so that really got into the science of burnout. But I would take that back if we weren't recording live.
No, I love
Um,
it. No, Rachel, as someone who has been, I have a love-hate relationship with academia. It's very problematic. So no judgment here.
yes. Okay. Thank you so much.
You're so
Um,
welcome.
hope that holds true for everyone else listening. I'm a good
They'll
person.
survive. They'll survive.
Um, but it had me thinking about a handful of times. One where I experienced burnout, and then two, actually where I experienced deep grief, which
Mm,
led to burnout.
yep.
So my nana died at the beginning of the pandemic, and she raised me. She was much more than a nana. She was the really only mom figure that I knew, because my mom was not in my life. Um, and so my nana died at the beginning of the pandemic, and there was just so much grief. Like I didn't know how I was gonna survive and live and move forward, which then led into burnout because I had this idea that I needed to keep working. And it was so interesting how people were responding to me, because I
Yep.
would write about the grief.
Yes.
And people would say things to me like, I know you have a lot on your plate. And
Hmm.
I'm like, I have always had a lot on my plate.
Yeah.
There, there's always been some form of grief. I mean, I'm a human being. What do you think has been happening behind the scenes, navigating a pandemic? Like, what the hell is on your plate? Um,
Yeah.
and so it put me in a place where one, I was so to the bone raw
Yep.
of grief that I stopped caring how people were going to perceive me. I stopped caring if my clients were going to feel like I wasn't available for them. I had to send several emails. It was like, I'm available, I'm here, like I'm still doing my job. Like, please let me decide what is too much for me, because I had a lot of people deciding, well,
Yeah.
I don't want you to do this. I don't want you to worry. And I totally understand it with the grief thing, but it's the same thing with burnout. And
Yes. Yes.
and
Yes.
it's
Yes.
like, if you are burnt out and you talk about it, then you threaten this idea of authority that you are supposed to hold as an entrepreneur. Um, you know what I mean?
100%. Like, it takes you out of the quote unquote being professional, and it can really freak people out. Like, they don't know what to do. And then they're trying to almost manage your burnout for you. And you don't
Mhm.
need them to do that. You're like, can I be a human and also still be, working as a professional without people reacting to that because they're freaked out by it?
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's this like really interesting. I remember this other time. This was probably 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and my business grew at a rapid rate. Like
Mm-hmm.
overnight, it like skyrocketed. And I got so burnt out that things started falling through the cracks.
Yeah.
Like my response time was a little bit delayed. So whereas it once was like, I'll get back to you within like 10 minutes of you texting me, it
Mm-hmm.
went to like my max of 24 hours. And I just remember feeling like I'm ruining my business. I don't deserve to be an entrepreneur. Like I don't
Mm-hmm.
deserve to be here if I can't like navigate this. And I remember that people treated me so shitty at the time. Like, it was such I thought my business was gonna, like, burn to the ground. Like, that's how bad everything was at the time.
Yep.
And I just remember feeling like, "I can't talk about this." I remember even telling myself, like, "This will make a great story in 2 years if you make it through it." But, like,
Oh,
God
wow.
forbid you talk about it before the 2 years is there, otherwise people won't, like, trust you. Like, if you talk about the
Yes.
burnout close to you now, people won't trust you.
Right. They'll be like, oh, I can't, that she's burnt out. So I just better not reach out, try and work with her. She's not going to give me the support that I need, all of that.
Yeah. And it was just like and so then when I found out that I had bipolar 2, I was very unwell. I did not want to live anymore.
Mhm.
And I almost had, I was feeling those same experiences of
Yep.
like, oh my God, like now it's on a whole nother level. And I think if I look back to the time that I was burnt out, I think that I was in a depressive low from my bipolar. I just didn't know it at the time.
Yeah.
Um, and and then it moved into a burnout.
Okay. That makes sense.
But I just can't get behind this idea that we're not talking about that our plates are always full. I don't know anyone's plate who's not full. Like, as a business coach, I'm on the receiving end of all of my clients with their dread, with their grief, with everything that's on their plate. And
Yeah.
it's so interesting how it's okay for them to hold their own humanity, but once, like, if I were to say, hey, I'm a little overwhelmed right now. Like, I even made a post the other night on my bipolar 2, and you could see people commenting like, I'm here, I'm giving you support. It was very much so like, I'm describing it bad because now I'm acting like I'm not supportive of those messages. I totally am, but it was very much so like, you're not okay. Like, I get that you're not okay. And it was like, no, I'm totally like, I'm
Yeah.
here and I'm fine. I'm fine. Like, I'm experiencing a lot and I'm also okay. You know what I mean?
Yes. 100%. You know that advice that's like, do not share anything until you've like healed from it.
Yeah.
I hate that advice. Well, let me give a little nuance, right? Because like, yes, if I am like in a huge fight with Chris, I'm not going to like go live on Instagram and be like, this is real life, like I'm not going to do that. But I also think there's so many things that we're never going to be fully healed from. It's not a thing. And so to then just be like, I'm just going to sit on all of this until it feels far enough away from me, then it really does reduce us into being quote unquote of service to other people, and like that's all that we are. And I want to really like smash that narrative and be like, no, I can be a full-fledged human with all kinds of personal fuck ups and still show up and support people beautifully. it's
Absolutely,
it's not one
absolutely.
or the other. It's not. And also, like, to pull behind the scenes of the curtain, I'm working as a therapist. I worked around other therapists. I knew a lot of other therapists. Now it's the same with coaching. Like, people are fucked up. Okay. Like, we
Yes,
all
they
have our
are.
shit. I hate feeling like someone's putting me on a pedestal. Like, I love being affirmed and celebrated. I love verbal affirmation and all of that. Like, love it, love it, love it. But I can tell when someone's put me on a pedestal, and I'm like, there is
Yes.
nowhere for me to go but down. And it's not my job to manage how people see me, their expectations of me, like how they've decided to place me. But it is like one of those things where I'm like, no, I'm a person. I'm not going to lay all my shit bare. I want to sometimes, but to honor privacy of myself and other people, like, I don't. But I'm like, I have my shit. It does not mean anything about my abilities, but it is there. And I do not want to have to pretend like I'm good so that way I can support you. And when I'm not good, I can. It's like, in any other
Right.
industry, that's not a thing. And when I was a therapist, none of my clients knew what was going on with me, because that's the nature of therapy. You don't know your therapist personally. You're not going to really be close with them outside of that therapy room. It's all about you, which is fine. That's how it is. But yeah, I just don't want to have to hide.
I don't want to have to hide either. It's exhausting. And my friend Erin Brown, she said something really great recently. She made a post about this actually. She said that advice to never share from an open wound is actually
Yeah.
extremely privileged because it's assuming that, like, okay, if you've had the time to heal, it's not
Mm.
just the time to heal, it's the access to tools, the access to therapy, the access to whatever to be able to heal.
Yes. And like, to get into this even a little bit more, I cannot tell you, both in my grad school program, in my work as a therapist, I see Chris going through it now in his work and training as a surgeon. This onus of navigating burnout by using resiliency places
Mm,
100% of the responsibility on the individual person to do all these things
yeah.
so that they don't get burnout, without looking at the systemic issues that lead to burnout. Like, I know, if I can speak to like a lot of therapists, they have to see so many clients a day because they work in a nonprofit, or to make decent money because insurance doesn't pay. Like, it's so intense that there's not enough self-care in the world that you can do to combat that. And I hate when people are like, do your self-care. It's like, it's not enough sometimes. And that's true for like so
Mm-mm.
many. I have friends across all kinds of industries, and this like idea that you just got to take really good care of yourself so that you can just provide untold amount of labor. It's bullshit.
Oh, it is bullshit. And also, if we're looking at this narrative of, well, not the narrative, if we're looking at COVID as well, who isn't burnt out? Like, how did you survive in your business? Like, how are we surviving in our businesses? Like,
Mm-hmm.
COVID is real, and like how we navigated that. Like, I don't know anybody who isn't burnt out as a result of that. So to then hold this narrative that we are of authority, like fuck that. Like that is exhausting. And to be of authority, what does it mean again? To be of authority means that people obey you. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
anyone to obey me. Like
No.
if that's what we've been taught and that's what we're upholding, like we're only perpetuating this really, really, really harmful narrative that we can't be our full human selves.
So you're saying you don't want to be a cult leader,
No.
which is
No,
so
thank you.
disappointing. I was going to join. I would have joined. Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%. I'm tired of it. It's obnoxious. It's so problematic. It's harmful, and it doesn't leave space for us to be humans. And I'm tired of having, I just like, I have no interest in performing anymore. I'm over it in like any area of my life. I want to just show up as I am. And that doesn't mean like spilling my wounds all over people and bleeding on them, right? That's not fair. I have to do a level of taking care of myself so that I can show up in a way that's healthy and supportive for my clients, and not just my clients, but the people in my life.
Yeah.
Um, but I also want space for my humanity to coexist without that having to mean anything negative about my work.
Yes, without that having to mean anything negative about your work. I hope this episode is listened to many times over because we need to be in spaces where we can hold our humanity and our work at once.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm getting really exhausted from this, like from there are so many times where I want to say things, not necessarily even on burnout. Like maybe there was a hard day. Like I want to talk about hard days. Like I want to talk about hard moments. I want to talk
Yep.
about like I remember I kind of bulldozed this pandemic. At every sign of like something that was happening in the world, like Sarah and I were doing a call on it. We were taking charge on like navigating what's happening with our clients and like how they're holding space for other space holders.
Yeah.
And I remember I had this client who was also a nurse, and I had this client I had this client who was also a nurse. It makes me want to cry thinking about it. And she was just telling me what was happening like on in the ER that day.
Yeah.
And I just like burst out in tears because I realized that I had like bulldozed everything. I had bulldozed my humanity. I'd just like run through everything and not allowed my humanness to exist for 1 second in the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I went into extreme burnout, and I just wish that there was more room for the full scope of our humanity inside of our businesses. And people say that there is, and people say that they're willing to talk about hard things, but they're not.
Yeah.
They say, I want to talk about hard things. And then you talk about a hard thing, and they're like, well, not like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Or it has to
and-
be packaged a certain way. Like people have gotten really smart and they know all the words to throw out to make something feel like they're going deep, but they're not
mm,
going deep at all. And they're actually scratching the surface. They're tying it in a nice, neat, pretty bow. And then they're
mhm.
making people who are being real about stuff feel more isolated, like something's wrong with them, like they're broken because they're going through hardship, but they can't package it in a pretty way.
Well, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And listen, your pain is not supposed to be palatable to other people. And we are a
Ooh.
culture, yeah, we are a culture that is so uncomfortable with hard emotions, with pain, with death, with grief. We are so hands off. I worked for years as a grief therapist. And one of the things that my clients said was the hardest thing to navigate was the way other people pulled away, almost like they were going to, it was like contagious and they didn't want to catch it. And as long as they kept enough distance between themselves and the person who was grieving, they could protect themselves from having to
Mm,
think about their own mortality or their own grief or whatever it is. And it's just, it sucks the life out of their being humanity. And so when you're in a position of leadership, which you and I both are in our own ways in our work, um, sometimes it feels like we have to show up in a way where it's like, there's a lesson here. Let me share what I've learned from my pain. And sometimes that
right.
is available to us. And sometimes it's just like, this is really painful and I don't have the answers. And that can make people very uncomfortable, but I also think it makes people that feel the same way feel very seen and affirmed, which is what I care about more than being of authority or quote unquote professional all the time. Like, fuck that. No.
Yeah. So how does that feel for you now then? Because obviously when you were a therapist, like it
Mm-hmm.
had to be about the person in front of you. But
Yeah.
now I think that you do such a beautiful job. Sometimes I'm like in awe of the way that you can just like share things and then like share your life and share how you're feeling and share what's coming up for you. And like in real time, or it feels like in real time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can also be like talking about your business and talking about both. Like, how does that feel for you, the difference between the two now?
I am smiling really hard because that's the same way I feel about you, like how you share. So we just like hype each other up, which I love about our
Thank you.
relationship.
Me too.
One of the things that I found to be difficult when I was working as a therapist was like my clients, and this is not anything about them. This is the way therapy is set up. My clients like didn't see me. Like I had a few clients who I was like, I could be a box sitting in this chair, like
Mm.
an inanimate object. It
Oh, I
would
know what you
not
mean.
matter. Like it would not matter to them. And the human part of me was like, that hurt, like that really hurt. And even when I had to share that I was like moving, and I was, I gave people like a big heads up of timeline to be in integrity so people had space to process that I was leaving and get them connected to the right kind of support in my absence. But I could
Mhm.
tell it like was shocking to people that I like had a life. Like I think like they didn't consciously think of it, but I was like, do they think that I just like live here and like sleep here? And it was like I could
Mm.
tell it was like shocking that I had a partner, that I was moving, that I basically had a life. And I felt sad sometimes because I just couldn't share my humanity. And again, that's how therapy set up. That's how it is. But I could feel myself, especially when I started coaching on the side. And I started
Yeah.
realizing what I love about coaching is that it feels like co-collaboration. Like I'm working with my clients instead of therapy. There's a huge power dynamic of like therapist client. No
Mhm.
matter how empowering we are with our clients, that dynamic is still there where they look to me for answers and like I know all of the things. And I feel like in coaching, it feels much more collaborative, which I love. Like I love it's like we're working together. These people see my Instagram stories, they know that I'm a person, and instead of that being a deterrent, they're like into it.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I think what we're taught in the coaching space is that there is supposed to be a hierarchy, which is
Mm-hmm.
where that authority is that comes from.
Yeah.
But I think that when there can be co-collaboration and choice and
Yeah.
autonomy, like, oh, like what like a beautiful dynamic of what a coaching relationship can look like. And I totally relate to your clients like seeing you as a box. I
Yeah.
remember I had this one client who we were talking about like gay rights, like in our in a team call. And I don't remember what she said, but I remember feeling like she didn't actually see me like as a gay woman.
Mm-hmm.
She saw me or as a queer woman. She had seen me as like Rachel who dressed a certain way. And like that's how she just had this like image of me, not as like I just remember feeling like not being taken into consideration at all, like not my humanity being seen
Mm-hmm.
at all. And it was the worst feeling in the entire world.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And again, it's like someone creates a whole narrative of you in their mind. They project it all over you. This happens in our businesses, but this happens in personal life as well. And it
Yeah.
makes me want to have like a very adult temper tantrum where I just like throw my body on the floor and like have a meltdown to be like, see, I don't have it together.
Oh, like, this whole podcast right now, I feel like I'm holding back tears because I feel so excited that we're having this conversation.
Me
And I
too.
also feel like I feel deeply vulnerable. Like,
Yeah.
and also when people listen to this podcast, I think some people will do what they've always done, which is like you and I were talking about this. Like there is no wrong that I could do,
Mm-hmm.
like in putting you on a pedestal.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that just further makes it more isolating. Did that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
It made sense in my brain.
Like that, even if sharing this, some people will still be committed to being like, no, you're perfect.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's true. Like you could get on Instagram, you could live stream a fight with Sarah on Instagram, and there would still be people that are like, relationship goals. Like,
Oh my
and I'm
God.
like, oh, okay, I get it. You know, you can love somebody's relationship and think they're wonderful, but we don't know what goes on behind closed doors all the time. And it's not appropriate to share it like that all the time. So, can we just not?
Yeah. You know what? Like, I feel like I want to make a pledge. Like, I feel like I want to start a campaign. I want to make a pledge. Oh, I want to make a t-shirt. I want to like make a community where we're all like telling the truth more.
I know. I know. That's what I'm into. I'm so into it. I don't know. I just, this idea of burnout, I think a big thing that comes factors into feeling burnt out, and I know it's happened for me over the years, is when I feel like I'm struggling, whether it's with work or with stuff in my personal life or like my health or my mental health, whatever it is. I'm struggling with that, but I am not allowed to show it. I have to just keep showing up in a certain way. And that is where the burnout starts coming in hot because I'm
Mm,
like, whoa, there's no space for me here. And I have to like pretend. And I am terrible at pretending. Like I used to get in trouble in professional spaces for the faces I would make, like during meetings. If I thought someone said something that I was like, that was ridiculous, I would like flash my eyes. I would make, like, so I'm really bad at pretending, like really bad. Like if I'm upset, everyone knows it. You can feel it. It's all over my face. You can feel the energy. So I just think that was a really big burnout for me. And I think the other piece of this too is when you're navigating feeling exhausted, is also being like, what do I even want with my life? We can hit burnout when we are trying to go after someone else's model of what a successful life, business, relationship, whatever
true.
is. If I am trying to squeeze into this mold of I need XYZ to be successful, but it's not even what I fucking want, I'm going to get burnt out real quick because I'm not even doing what feels right for me.
Yes. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big mic drop moment.
Yeah, it was a big reality check for me as someone who spent a lot of years checking the boxes and like following all the steps. I loved being like a good girl, a good student, a good daughter, a good girl. Like, oh, ugh, throw up. Like, I loved it. I like got off on it. And it like was how I felt validated and worthy, as if I was following this other model. And then there just came, it wasn't like I woke up one day and was like, burn it down. But I did kind of slowly over time as I got older and was healing and working on a lot of my shit and getting more honest. I was like, wait, what the fuck am I doing? Like, these are not actually things that I want or care about. And I don't care about being a good girl. And um, yeah. And it was very liberating, but it's also very confusing.
Mm, liberating the whole scale of human emotions.
The whole range, the full spectrum humanity that exists in these
Mm.
spaces that people don't want to talk about because it makes them look unprofessional.
And what even is professionalism, especially in the online space? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, what are we what are we worried about? Who gets to decide? Is there a committee? Because fuck that committee. I want no part of it.
Me neither. That is not a committee I would like to be involved in any way at all.
No.
No,
I'm gonna
I no, it's all bullshit. It's all made up. So that's my thing is like we can buck the system as much as possible and we should because it's all bullshit anyway. So it's important that we do things that honor our humanity, what works for us. That's one of the ways we can protect ourselves from feeling burnt out.
mm,
Um, yeah.
yeah. So good, so good. We had a lot of people ask us some questions
Mhm.
um on Instagram.
Yeah, some really
I
good
want to bring
ones.
some of those up.
Yes.
Um Someone asked, "How do I know when it's time to get some extra support for myself?"
Great question. So there might be a time like some people wait until they're kind of in a crisis mode, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. If you are really struggling and you're feeling overwhelmed and you're feeling like almost incapacitated, frozen, like you can't move through things or totally overwhelmed by everything in your life, and like the little things feel really hard and
Yeah.
you're super stuck, like get some support, talk to somebody. And then the other piece of that is you don't have to be in that state to get support. Like we do not have to wait for things to be hard to reach out for
Yeah.
help. I think that that's a misconception. Like therapy can be for maintenance. And then you're in there when shit goes down. Same with coaching, whether this is professional coaching, like for a bit like business coaching, or it's like you're working on a very personal thing, or you're in therapy, like get support.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
you're
I
asking
completely
the
echo that.
question, if you are asking the question, that might be an indicator that you want some.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
100%. I completely agree.
Yeah.
Someone else asked another question. How to be honest about burnout without making people feel guilty or not want to work with you.
Ooh, you go first.
Okay. You know, I love to put boundaries on things and to share where I'm coming from when I share something. So when I
Yes.
made a post last night or whenever it was about my bipolar 2, and I was talking about how I was romanticizing my mania and how like I wish it was there. What I forgot to put on that post was like, I'm sharing this from like I'm okay. Like I don't want
Mm-hmm.
your advice. Like I don't need you to manage my emotions for me. And I will say, please do not manage my emotions for me. And even when I was severely depressed over the winter, I would put on my post like, clients, if you're reading this, like I'm still available for my work. Like please let me make the decisions about what I can and cannot hold. And
Yes.
I would always put a PSA on everything. And for some
Mm-hmm.
people, it really pissed them off. And for other people, it was super empowering. And then they went and put those PSAs on their own thing. So I think that you can share. One thing that I don't like is when people are like a lot of service providers do this, like copywriters and graphic designers, they share things that it's like when a client sends you this and you like roll your eyes or whatever, like that's something I'm not a fan of. Because then I feel like we're talking like poorly about the client.
Yeah.
Um, but I think when you are centering your own experience and when you are sharing your full scale humanity, like even saying things like, this feels really, I'm really nervous to share this. Like, I'm nervous to share this because it challenges the idea that I'm supposed to be of authority and I don't want to be of authority. Like, feel free to use that sentence. I think bringing in the conversation of what you're nervous about is going to then challenge the conversation as a whole. And I think that's going to be really important.
Yes. I love that so much. I co-sign all of it. I mean, truly.
I,
And I love that you talked about centering your own stuff and not the client's. It is not the client's fault if
no.
you're burnt out, right? It's
Mm-mm.
really not about them. And one of the things I loved about when I was working as a therapist was I had supervision with other therapists where we could talk and process through things. And I think there's some coaching spaces that offer that, but because it's an unregulated industry, it's not mandatory. And a lot of coaches don't. And so I think having spaces where you can go and talk through, like, hey, I have a situation, I'm feeling triggered, help me process that. That does not need to happen online.
No.
You can share from your own experiences, but like I'm not yeah, because then you're shaming a client. If they see that, they might totally shut down. And like, even though it's not
Right.
therapy, even though it's coaching, there is still a power dynamic of someone is coming to you and trusting you to hold space for them, to keep their shit confidential unless they, give permission for you to share certain things, like whatever that is. So then put that out there, that can deeply wound people and make them not trust the person that they are going to for help.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good question.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we have another one. How do you course correct if you've reached a state of burnout / resenting your clients and work?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So the privilege comes into play here as well, because if you have any sort of autonomy and control over how many clients you're seeing and what your schedule looks like, if
Right.
you've gotten to the point where you are resenting your clients, I would shift the schedule as much as you can. I would cut down you talk about this a lot, Rachel. What is your
Mhm.
like bare minimum capacity, and
Yeah.
operate at that to give your nervous system some space, get extra support so that you can talk about this, process through it, but like trim down your shit as much as possible, get extra support, talk to someone professionally who can help you navigate these feelings. But again, there's a lot of privilege in being able to do that. Sometimes we do not have the privilege financially or whatever it is to cut down. And so in those instances, asking for as much support from people around you as you can have.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely echo what you just said. Um, maybe I'm going to read that question again. How to course correct if you reach a state of burnout, resenting your clients?
Yeah, I think I mean I completely agree. I don't think there's anything I could really add to that except when you resent your clients, I often think you're not working with the right client.
Ooh, that makes a lot of sense. Yes.
Yeah, some people resent their clients. I've resented clients before, and it was nothing that
Hmm.
they did. It was all me. I took on the wrong kind of client, and then I was
Yeah.
so fucking pissed.
Yep.
So I think that's something to consider too.
That's great. I am also extremely careful about who I take on with, because if we work with them in a very close capacity, very high touch, tons of interaction, if you're with somebody and it's not the right fit for you or for them or for both of you, it is going to be very, very difficult.
Oh, 100%. And that's just like the easiest pathway towards resentment.
Yeah. And the thing I always want to remind people is like, if it's not in the best interest for you, it's not in the best interest for them.
Mm,
So you're not being selfish. You're being supportive of what's at the highest good for everyone involved in the situation. Always make
yes,
referrals. Big fan of referrals. Have a list. Send people resources and other places if you're not the right fit. It's okay.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
completely
Mm-hmm.
agree. Um, Last question. Um, what is this last question?
What happens, like shame and guilt that a space holder feels when someone else is holding space for them and listening to them. So if you do it
Oh,
professionally, how do you navigate feeling shame and guilt for someone to do it for you? You want me to tackle
mm,
this?
yeah, go into it.
Um, I've navigated this before, and he's always like, Alyssa, do not be a martyr. Don't be a martyr.
Mm,
And like that term used to be like used to describe someone who would basically die for their like religious beliefs and practices, but it's evolved to also include people that are always kind of like suffering. It's like,
yeah,
oh no, woe is me. Like this is, and he would just be like, stop. You do this for other people professionally. Like you also need to make sure that you're supporting yourself. Like that feels like the bare minimum is that you're getting support as you support other people. Um, like no one's going to give you a badge of honor for like suffering and being a martyr. Like it's the
yeah.
opposite of what you would advise other people to do. So what I would say is like, you do this for other people, meaning you need it done for you as well.
Mm,
Shame and guilt, normal. I would always wonder and ask yourself, where is this coming from? Like, where is this judgment and shame and guilt coming from? Like, why am I feeling this way about myself? Would I be putting this on my best friend if they were experiencing this? And kind of just asking the question of like, what is this really about for me and where is this coming from? And you might not be able to get rid of it, but to at least have some understanding of maybe why it's happening, and knowing that no matter what, you deserve support and you need it. And that's what's going to help you show up both for your clients, but also for your own life, which you deserve.
I co-sign on that.
Did you ever feel like um, there was times in your business where you were giving the best of yourself to your work, and basically the people, the most important people in your life, in your personal life, were getting like the shittiest version of you because you were just empty inside?
Honestly, I still feel that way sometimes.
Yeah, I think that's like a lifelong thing. I heavily felt like that when I was working at a nonprofit. Like I just felt like I came home empty a lot and had very little energy and capacity to support
Mhm.
other people. So that's something I'm still figuring out now.
Yeah, I think about that all the time. I mean, like Sarah's my person, so like I know that Sarah and Cooper are like it's like my clients and then Sarah and Cooper, and then after that it's really as my business grows, which it has significantly during the pandemic, which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah.
Um it's been how do I manage my energy?
Yeah.
How do I show up for my friends? Like my friends would call me and I would just have nothing.
Yes.
I would ignore their
Yes.
calls. And thankfully, my friends are the kind of friends who I can ignore their calls and they know that I'm fine and I still love them.
Yeah.
um, so it didn't change our friendship. But I remember calling my friends during this like episode in the winter and just being like, I'm so sorry. Like, I haven't been able to be there. I've had absolutely nothing. Um, and I'm really still figuring out what that looks like.
Yep. I've also navigated that too. And like, I think why this conversation is important, it's because it's ongoing. You're going to feel differently. You're going to have different capacity at different points in your life based on what's happening in your work, what's happening in your personal life, what's
Mm-hmm.
happening with your mental health, your physical health. All of these things are ever changing. So you're never just going to be like, I'm good now. This is my self-care plan to prevent burnout. And this is what works forever. So I think it's just an ongoing conversation with yourself to be like, what do I need in this moment in time?
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
don't think we do, I don't think we I don't think we care for ourselves enough.
No.
I think that we think that we're caring. I think that space holders think that they're caring for themselves when they've really talked about caring all day long in other capacities. So like I
Yeah.
used to do that. I used to
Yeah.
be like, "Oh, I'm so great at taking care of myself," but I just talk to other people about taking care of themselves all day long. Like there
Oh
was
my
no like
God.
care for my own self inside of that equation.
I feel so called out. I'm the same way. I'm like, there have been times even recently where I'm like, I will sit down and be like, Alyssa, you are so full of shit. Like you just went and talked about XYZ and you are not fucking doing it. Like having to give myself some tough love to be like, are you walking the talk right now? Cause like you sometimes you get in this trap of like, you know, all the things and you're like
Mhm.
giving that information and sharing it, but you're not embodying it. And it's like, okay, I know what I need to be doing and I'm not doing it. So like, let me get my shit together because this is really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Calling my own
Yes.
self out with that one.
I know you're calling me out, probably calling out a lot of people, but we need it. We need the tough love and the honesty.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, this has been a beautiful episode. I'm so happy that we were able to talk about burnout in more depth. And I definitely want to continue the conversation of how we can continue to hold space for ourselves as space holders. I think we really opened the conversation up to the burnout piece. And I think that we can extend beyond here and really expand over the next couple, well, not over the next couple of episodes, but over future episodes on this more.
Absolutely agreed. I'm so grateful we're having this conversation. And as always, for everyone listening, we love getting feedback of like what resonated with you, what you took away from it. It really helps us to know what people want more of. So please continue to give us feedback and leave us a review if you feel so inclined to. We love it. And we're so grateful
Yeah.
for you listening.
Yes. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.